I'm Jeff Zakarsky,
And I'm Jason Primrose.
and welcome to Gentlemen, the #1 podcast for open-hearted leadership.
So I wanted to do something new this week because I'm like, there's things that I use that help support me in being like healthy and being keeping track of like my fitness, anything business. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of those things that support me in my leadership, and I wanted to invite you to do the same. The one thing I'll mention that I want to call out this week is Relay Financial. I really love the digital bank platform idea because the cool thing is like there aren't any fees associated with banking with them, and it's allowed us to like properly organize all of our bank accounts, and we can both be connected virtually and connect our individual accounts virtually to the business. Um, and then my financial advisor put in all um, these different accounts underneath that account for like taxes and owner pay and income and operating expenses and stuff like that. So it's a really, really cool platform. I believe it's free to sign up. Maybe we'll get a referral code or something that we can share with people here pretty soon. But for now, when you sign up, say you heard about it on Gentlemen the podcast when I ask you. So that's my one for this week. I really love it. I was in there yesterday and today. I was like, this is just so freaking cool. I can see everything.
I love that. And what I started to get out of just even how your accountant or your money person set it up is being able to set the different accounts or the different earmarks inside of the account to see what sort of sub account is where at any point in time. So I'm actually looking at taking that on in my regular business banking, and I looked at my business account and they don't have that function. So I can set it up if I bring it all the way down to QuickBooks, which is also what I use. But I don't know, there's some evolution coming. I mean, with digital currency, digital management, and how that works, and I think that these banks have been around for a really long time. And so for them to go through any sort of overhaul to get to what some of these new institutions are dropping on their first try, it's a huge project for them. So I'm actually in, I don't know, I got to do my taxes and stuff like that, but I see an opportunity to say, okay, well, is there an ease? And it looks like there is in actually transitioning some of my stuff to these other banking systems. So it's been really cool to see even just how that small impact for me had me start thinking about how I want to manage my money. And I think even anybody listening to this podcast is probably, in a few camps. They're like, oh, I'm really great at managing money, or I hate managing money, or whatever the story is. Money is complicated, or I suck at it, or I'm really, there's a story around how money goes in people's lives. And so, I think there's just an opportunity to see like, and what's the best support for you? So Relay Financial, absolutely. For me, what has been the support structure? Well, I mean, honestly, the thing that I'm creating in my life right now is taking an extra day off every week. So it's not, it's not necessarily a system or something like that, but the things that I'm going to bring with me on that, I think, are going to be what I can talk about here. So, I plan on doing a lot of meditation when I'm gone. And for me, I don't know if you, Jason, or some other people out there, like sometimes they struggle just to sit in silence when nothing else is going on. And I get a lot out of some even like subtle guided meditation. So I'll be bringing Insight Timer with me, which has a ton of stuff. I'm going to be in nature, so I want to do like one earbud in, one earbud out, so I can hear the trees and the squirrels over here, but also, some voice that helps keep me grounded, because that's the thing. I have such a wild brain sometimes that creatively can be a masterpiece, but also can get me into trouble because it never shuts down. And that's part of what this new adventure is for me, is learning to shut down on purpose, not go, 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 go until my body says, nope, it's time to actually shut down because I say so. So I'm going to do that every week. So Insight Timer is really good. I think they have a free version. I have bought the annual subscription, which I think might be $70 or something like that. Maybe it's $100, but the additional things that I get are all these different courses and exclusive content that I use probably on a weekly basis. Different courses around mental strength and groundedness and presence and spirituality and open-heartedness and self-personal power. I mean, all of these topics, I think, are things that I use on a regular basis. So, and I know there's a lot out there. I've used a lot of the other ones, but for some reason I keep coming back to Insight Timer. Yeah, you too. Okay, great. We should talk to them.
We should definitely talk to them.
Stay tuned if you're listening. Who knows? Maybe we'll get you a code there. We're just, we want to share the things that are making a difference. I think sometimes in my life, I look for new situations as I grow and as I transform and as I level up my life. All of a sudden I have to level up other things as well. And because I've never done it before, it feels confusing and sometimes like difficult to sort out. So I love having conversations like this with people that are a little bit ahead in the journey of me, who have had some breakthroughs that I aspire to have, and what are they using to support their life right there, as opposed to me just putting on a blindfold, walking out into the wilderness and like picking something up to see if it works. So always our commitment is, and I think Jason mentioned that, but our commitment here is to bring what's working for us. So if it works for you, great. And if there's something else, also share that with us. I mean, it's not what we do is not necessarily the right thing, but if you have something that's working in your life that's helping you level up, bring it to our community and share it with us. Send us an email, send us something on Instagram so that we can hear and try it out and maybe talk about it here on the show. So today is courage and vulnerability, and rather than just talk about what courage is and maybe what vulnerability is from a definition standpoint, I'd actually look at some application. So Jason, you kind of shared something that felt important at the beginning of this call for you that seems like it's something that you don't often share out in the world with a whole bunch of people. And I'm just wondering how courage and how vulnerability played a role. Like, what was courageous about for you? Like, what felt courageous for you, and what felt vulnerable in that share?
I think what felt courageous is like owning something was wrong, but also owning that I'm responsible for it. Like, the shift was from me thinking that it was like because I had this kind of skin situation that was happening, which by the way isn't happening anymore. And so to shift the responsibility to myself and like actually getting a handle on like what it is that's causing the stress and the anxiety and the behavior that's manifesting as a result of it, and like what I can do to actually create a different outcome. And I think the vulnerability part is that it's kind of embarrassing and it sounds gross and it's like weird and it's like it definitely is an invitation to judgment in some capacity, but also an invitation to compassion. So I think I think that goes for me too, right? It's for me as a person, it's an invitation for me to judge myself, or it's an invitation for me to have compassion for myself. So, it's become more clear to me that a lot of the courage, a lot of what courage means for me isn't necessarily about like braving what's working, what's good, and like being in that. It's more about looking at what's not working and what isn't quite going well, because that's actually that's the part that's scary. That's the part that requires both courage and vulnerability, because I have to be able to put my ego aside, lay down the walls in order to look in that place. Um, and it's a place where I'm not protected.
Mm.
You know, it's an unprotected um, experience, um, which I often think actually that vulnerability is unprotected, and that's why it takes so much courage.
Mm. Well, thanks for sharing it here. What I got for myself is from what you shared was um, like the invitation is there, and you can either judge, I can either judge, or I can create, or I can give myself compassion, or for other people. My my defense mechanisms are quick to want to be righteous, like from power, righteous, superior, just an asshole. But that's how it manifests when I'm protecting myself, which is interesting
Yeah.
because then I go out into the world. I'm like, wow, that person's being a real asshole. I could reframe that and go, wow, that person's in crazy protection mode right now. I wonder what's going on for them. Like what a different perspective. Like, and for me to fight like anger with anger, or for me to fight, not even fight, but for me to be with somebody else's anger, from compassion and empathy, that's the courageous thing for me when that happens, because my fear gets kicked up in a way where somebody else's anger will elicit anger in mine, because I'm somehow, if somebody's angry around me, I somehow feel smaller than that. And so courageous thing for me is actually lean into love and compassion and being, which is cool because it's like what, 2 episodes ago or 1 episode ago, we talked about love and being. The opportunity is, but it takes something. That's the thing, is like, it takes something for me to say, I am historically not great at being with other people when they're angry, especially if I perceive it to be something about me. And like, it's interesting. I say that, and I think to some people that might be vulnerable. But in saying it here, it doesn't actually feel vulnerable. So I'm like, I'm wondering what's the layer deeper
Yeah,
in that conversation, right?
I was gonna say that to you. I was actually gonna say
Yeah.
that to you. So, um, let's see. Um, what's the most vulnerable you've been, since you started like in the last couple of years, since you started doing this work? Because
Oof.
what I believe is that we're very much, we built an incredible image for ourselves based on our relationships, from from our childhood. And my work is the continuous dismantling of that image. And the only way for me to do that is through courage and vulnerability. Like, it's
Mm.
like, that's the, like, if I needed weapons to fight a war against my own, if I need to go to war on my own castle, like, I would need like courage and vulnerability and like an armor of love. You know what I mean? Um, so it's like you have to keep swinging those, to
Mm.
chip away at it. So I'm wondering, like, what's the biggest blow you've had to deliver? Like,
Mm.
what's the most vulnerable place?
Um, There's two that come to mind. Um, there's one that I've taken action on, and there's one that I'm taking action on. And the frame that I want to give before just even talking about them is it was that thing that you actually said around it took courage and vulnerability to face what wasn't working in order to change. Like it had to acknowledge the breakdown or create the breakdown in order to create the breakthrough. So for me, one of the pivot, why do I always have trouble saying this word? One of the very pivotal moments for me was in my relationship. And, you know, it's been an amazing relationship. It's been 5 years, and 5 years coming up in August, which is amazing. We're actually planning the wedding and all of that stuff right now, which from vision sounds amazing. Even just the stuff we've been dabbling in. But there was a point where it wasn't that way. And there was a point where I just felt like I was coming back to this point over and over and over and feeling depressed and anxious, to the point that I couldn't do the same thing anymore, which is, you know, for my patterns, it's take care of everybody else. It's make sure everybody else is okay. It's, those are the same thing. It's, you know, almost like, how do I want to say this? At the end of the day, like I just really wasn't comfortable being me 100%. And so I was doing all of these strategies to compensate for that. And what the impact that was having on my well-being was, I was burnt out. I was depressed. I could like not get out of bed in the morning. And so you want to talk about what wasn't working. I mean, my ability to function consistently on a week-to-week basis wasn't working. You know, and I had my pattern, and, you know, that somehow integrated with my partner's pattern, and as we all do in any sort of relationship. But I just got to the point where I'm like, I got to try something like totally different. And like, I had to choose to like stop. Like I had to choose to actually like pause and like create a separation and actually take some time for myself to gather myself, for me to heal and to really figure out like what was actually behind what was driving all of this. Like, what am I not seeing? And, you know, it was getting so bad for me at that point in time because I didn't have any traction with myself. So I couldn't get up for air long enough to be able to see anything, to be able to shift anything, to be able to change anything, to be able to heal anything. And so I actually had to choose to step away, in that situation. And that was scary because that was like the first time where I did something where I hadn't had no control for what was on the other side. And like, that was the breakdown that I was courageous enough and vulnerable enough to actually take on. Like, that specific action changed the course of my patterns, our relationship patterns, our relationship, to the point where we started having the conversations that really needed to be having, that were sort of under the surface, you know, that maybe we thought we were addressing or we weren't. But that was terrifying for me. And to hold that boundary of space, knowing that at the end of whatever space was or whatever the duration, there might not be somebody at the other side that's willing to be back in a relationship with me. So, that's probably one of the most courageous things that I've done, that's in my past. And that's about 2 years ago. So, you know, what I can distinguish as a result of creating that breakdown and coming back in is I had a fresh way of viewing my relationship that helped me understand what I wasn't being responsible for up to that point that was contributing to my mental health, my emotional health, my well-being in general. And that was a turning point for me. I don't think everybody has to go through that drastic of a breakdown to create such a breakthrough, but it was doing something totally different where I had zero control as to perceivably, I mean, control is an illusion, but I perceivably this is completely out of my hands. Like this isn't like God's hands. This isn't like somebody else's hands. And I felt that it wasn't in mine. But at the end of the day, I realized it was. And this was an example of me putting it in my hand and holding it and then going, okay, what do I want? What do I need? Like, what am I willing to pick up? Like, what am I willing to take responsibility for? Where am I out of integrity? Like all of these things that we're talking about as pillars to what it means to be a gentleman. Like you don't have to wait until the castle crumbles. Like these are practices to actually take on a daily basis. But I didn't know any better. I thought I knew better, but I didn't. So, that was, yeah. I think back on that and go, wow, that was 2 years ago. And I'm just looking at my life right now today and it's totally different. Like I'm totally different as a result of being willing. Like what I know is if I would have either just like, if I would have continued down that pattern, like I don't even know what happened, but it would have been terrible. Like I just know it would have been terrible. Like we would have probably hated each other and never talked again and all of that kind of stuff. And things are great. Like clearly the best relationship I've ever had, the strongest relationship I've ever had, like what we've weathered through, what we've built, who we are for each other as a result of being willing to go through the breakdown, was also. So that's like the next thing. It's like, okay, you got to be willing to be courageous enough to take the action to create the breakdown. And then you have to be courageous enough and vulnerable enough and responsible enough to rebuild from vision and rebuild from commitment and reinvent and reawaken who you actually are. That like from vulnerability, I don't really think I was being real for most of my life, even though I thought I was. So that's another thing I think I could share about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
That's
I got.
a good place. That's a good place to sit with. I really appreciate a lot of what you said about breaking the pattern. Like one of you needed to be the one to do it, and I don't know if it was only you or if it was a mutual decision, because I know you're both working on it.
This one was me. This was
Okay.
going out on a ledge. The safer thing would have been like to have a conversation, be like, hey, can we no, it's like, no, like the break. That's the thing. There was a breakthrough for me in it too. And I realized that the breakthrough and what that would open up for the rest of my life, whether it was with her in relationship, somebody else, my business, like I did it for the bigger vision of who I'm committed to being in this world. But that didn't make it any less scary.
No. Yeah. And that's the part. It's like it only actually takes one person to go there. And then, the other person may or may not be enrolled in that full breakdown, full separation, the rebuilding process. But it's not that you're doing it for them. It sounds like you had a commitment to yourself and, like you said, who you wanted to be. And that actually was able to override all circumstances, situations, belief systems, like the getting it wrong, the failure, the even the idea of that relationship after 5 years, 4 years, 3 years being a failure. All that had to go out of the window so that you could be yourself. And knowing, I personally have not been in a relationship for longer than a year. But knowing what I know about people's relationships that I'm in relationship with, the courage to break up or really, really look at what's going on does not seem to be there. Now, talking about my own personal, well, and then I'll also say that the whatever vision you had for your life was so powerful that you were able to enroll your partner back into this new vision and your connection to each other inside of it, which that's extremely powerful. And like you said, without the courage to look at the problem and break it, break away from it, break away from the situation, the circumstance, the connection, the relationship, and then the vulnerability to actually do the work inside of the decision, right? So, like, not stewing in regret, or what's going to happen with so and so, or who are they dating, or all the stuff that comes up, that the stories that are around like worth.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you stayed committed to like who you wanted to be, and that from what you said, that's what I heard was the thing that kept it all together. That had you come out on the other side with even more than you had when you know when you broke it off or paused it.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that you can't do it alone. I mean, maybe you can, but not really. Like what I learned through it, especially from courage and vulnerability, is I had to face it inside my relationship. And what was supportive is who was on my team to support me in my transformation and stand for me to get build the vision that I have. And like, it's interesting, when you have people that separate in a relationship, there's so many ways that can go. Maybe you shared friends, or now that there's a breakdown, their friends like have judgment against you and hate you. And what was interesting, because of the company that we keep, we're both coaches, and we both have pretty big support networks. And so the company that we keep wasn't concerned with us being right about our stories, and they weren't concerned about our BS. They were concerned about our visions and being happy, and like standing for us to be the one all the time on both sides. And when you have both people doing the work, and that's the thing, you have one person that's committed to doing the work and you have somebody else who's not committed to doing the work and the growth, there's a big separation there. And usually what happens, that's the idea of people when they say they grow apart, it's somebody's willing to grow and to evolve, and somebody else is stuck in their stuff, or they're choosing to stay in their stuff. And in this case, both of us were that's one of the reasons why our relationship works, is we're committed to continuously growing and evolving that. So but I had people on my side, calling me out on my shit, saying, yeah, this is yours. Like this is your pattern. This is your stuff. This is your shadows. And vice versa for her. So, that's the work. Our work is to get back to being and to be with each other from being. And like, that can also feel very vulnerable because there's nothing to do. There's nothing to fix. There's just like presence and connection and intimacy. But like you were saying, full vulnerability is like shields down, like shields in the other room. Like, it's not even the keeping it close in case you need to grab it. Like, it's the willingness to be fully seen for who you are, the good and the bad and the ugly, and or whatever judgment or assessment that I have on what it is. Because at the end of the day, it's just me. I think now that I'm like saying this out loud, it's really cool that the Love and Being episode came right before this, and just seeing how it translates inside this conversation of being fully seen as a gentleman, and what that's done for me, is what it's done for my family, what it's going to do for my future family. So yeah.
I would like to give us, well, I would like to give you utmost credit for the pillars, and and I believe that you also reorganized them, if I remember correctly.
I
The
did.
way
I did
the way that
actually.
you tracked them, but they
Yeah.
that was definitely masterful. The way that the episodes keep building on themselves,
Yeah.
um, they're just so perfectly timed. Um, it's interesting that you said that about the fully being seen, because that's actually the reason that I know to be true that that's the reason why I haven't been in a relationship, is the being fully seen. I have a pattern of like we were talking about, like the look over here, like don't look at this stuff. Um, and when you have true intimacy with someone, there's no hiding, but there's also no reason to hide. And so
There's no reason.
there's no reason to hide. So the courage for
Mm.
me, courage is the courage for me is actually starts with me. It's the
Nice.
courage to be vulnerable with myself and be real with myself, and also look at, like I said, look at the things that aren't working, like not having intimacy and love in my life right now,
Hmm.
or historically.
Hmm.
Um, and then the courage to show up, the courage to be seen, um, by the courage to be seen by someone that I want, that I could have such a powerful bond in love and connection with. Um, which again does tie back to the love and being episode, because that's why that vision was so powerful, that I could feel that this person who I haven't met yet possibly already saw me completely.
Mm.
And it's a feeling that I've never allowed anyone, it's a feeling I've never allowed myself to have,
Mm.
of being seen completely. So I definitely, that's something that I'm, in terms of like from the conversation, like it's a reminder that I can be love and I can be me, and I can still have the courage to like keep looking, and I can still be vulnerable about like
Mm.
all the stuff
Mm.
that's contributing to, or not contributing to my vision,
Hmm.
for like my romantic life.
Mm.
Um,
It sounds
yeah,
like that's what you're like one of the main things you're taking from you or from this conversation as we wrap up, right? Like
yeah,
this is the ability to create that, like to be that, and actually by starting to be that then it also gets created as well.
yeah. Yeah, I've been saying that I was like ready to be in a relationship
Hmm.
for a while, and I thought that it was because like I had things, like I was like, okay, I got my apartment and I have a car and like I've got my income and job, and which was kind of dashed by COVID, but whatever. Um, but then it became about what I really believe was possible, and
Mm.
uh, I'm like actually ready. I'm actually ready,
Declaring yourself
and
ready.
I'm declaring myself ready. And
That's
it's an
that's cool.
experiment. It's an experiment, and I was dating someone who we will have on the podcast later on, this
Nice.
season.
To
And that
be
was a really
continued
good
with courage and
exercise.
vulnerability.
TBD. Oh yeah, it's going to be amazingly awkward, but awesome. Um, but that was the first testament of like really being seen, and I still got very uncomfortable when we were in
Mm.
an intimate situation. I closed up like a fucking clam. I was just like, lock it up. This is too close. This is too intimate. I said I wanted it, but I don't want it. I don't want it.
Not
Um,
100%.
but I was 100%. But yeah, but looking at it from where I am now, this was months ago. So looking at
Mm.
it from where I am now, and like what I've been learning and like what I've been visualizing, um, and who I've been, who I who I'm being, it's like I was able to look at that situation and say, I caused that. It wasn't his attractiveness or, like there could have been any number of like excuses to come up with, but I was responsible for the outcome. Like I'm responsible for that outcome. And that was like purely my fear on full display, my my inability to be courageous in that moment. Well, I think it was more about my inability to be vulnerable in that moment, and that was around that fear, and fear won instead of courage. So, being so keenly aware of that is cool, and I'm committed to something different. The next time, that happens.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, let's do our wrap up here. Let's see, we're just at time here. Got to jump on something else. Super fun. I've really had a good time having this conversation because it didn't go the way that I thought that it would go, or the way that I thought that it should go, or the way the other episodes were. So courage to be in the free flow of everything. And I think that's a reminder. It's like, for me, like courage to be in the flow, courage to be flexible, put down the plan, like just be immersed out in all of it. So, and you shared what you were taking on. And is there anything else you want to share about what you had to?
No, I think that's enough. That's plenty.
That's enough vulnerability for the day. Cool. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to not only go back and listen to the previous ones as they do build on each other, but stay tuned for new episodes that drop every Tuesday. So if you got something new for yourself, we would love to hear about it as well. And Jason's got a little final closing remarks.
Yes, be sure to tune in next week for our chat with my dear friend Samir Janjua. And like Jeff said, we'd love to hear from you. So you can email us what you got from this episode and others at gentlementhepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we will do our best to respond too. If not an email, but definitely on the podcast. So appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.